Are you coming too quickly and you want to increase the amount of time that you're having sexual intercourse? This video is going to break down everything you need to know about lasting longer during sex, including the one must-know concept of PNR and 7 techniques that will take you from ejaculating in mere minutes to lasting as long as you would like. I'm Brandon the Dom. Let's dive in. How long do you actually last in bed? I can probably throw up some statistics on the screen right now that show the average sex session is between 5 and 7 minutes. But there's a large majority of guys that are lasting less than 3 to 4 minutes. Knowing this doesn't really help you though. It just puts you into the comparison game and gives you fodder for beating up on yourself and increases your sexual performance anxiety, something that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. I'll be completely honest. I've had times where I've lasted well into an hour, and I've had times where I've literally been a 2-pump chump and came less than a minute because I was so highly aroused. And that's even with knowing what I needed to do in order to last longer. So I'm going to tell you right now, it actually doesn't matter as much as you think, especially if you're building other skills in the bedroom, like the other videos I have on this channel. Although, of course, there was a time in my life where I was more insecure and unconfident about it, believing that my ability to last super long in the bedroom somehow made me more of a man. And so I got obsessed with figuring out how to last longer. So eventually I did become better at the skill using some of the techniques we're about to go over. Basically what lasting longer boils down to is managing your arousal levels. And I'm going to teach you how to do that both mentally and physically with techniques that you can do on your own in order to prepare for sex, and then techniques that you can use during sex. First, let's address how long do you actually need to last. I find the term premature ejaculation kind of funny because it presumes that there's a definitive amount of time that a guy must last in the bedroom. The amount of time that you think you should last is actually pretty subjective to you and your partner. There's really no right or wrong time frame for when you're supposed to come, as long as you're both satisfied. So then the question really becomes, how long do you need to last so that she is satisfied? Have you ever taken a look at some of Ayala's work, an influencer, sex researcher, sex worker? She basically does all these different surveys of her audience and in wider sexuality communities to see the sort of things that they're into and other types of questions. One of her surveys, which is far from comprehensive, showed that most women prefer 20 to 30 minutes of penetration after about 15 to 30 minutes of foreplay. However, in reality, in real practice, the amount of time that a woman wants you to last can vary widely between women. A woman that really enjoys intercourse and easily orgasms from penetration may want to have longer time of intercourse, where the woman that doesn't really care that much about intercourse and orgasms through other means, not really going to care how long you last. Furthermore, not every single interaction that you have with this same exact woman needs to be all-night sexcapades. Quickies can be fun sometimes too. It's about variety. That being said, because the amount of arousal control and physical stamina required to actually go 45 or 60 minutes, many women have not actually experienced that. So it's hard for them to say if they would actually enjoy it more. In my experience, it's usually a pretty unique experience for them, but it's not something that I can naturally do all the time, nor would I want to do that all the time. What happens far more often is intentionally drawing out foreplay and basically savoring each step of the sexual encounter, then usually having a shorter or normal round of intercourse, cuddling and talking, and then following by a longer round of intercourse. And basically alternating between just chilling with one another and fucking till we're both basically tired and ready to be done. And to be honest, I don't know how long those phases last. I'm not sitting there staring at the clock, and rather being aware and focused in the moment. All I really know is when we entered the room and when we're finished. I'm sure that there are times that are shorter and times that are longer, but it doesn't really matter because we're both left satisfied. Now let's talk about the one concept that you need to know that underlies all the techniques that I'm going to talk about today, which is PNR, the point of no return. Earlier, I told you that in order to last longer, you need to gain control of your arousal levels. Specifically, you need to learn how to bring yourself back from the brink of point of no return. The PNR is basically the exact point when your arousal turns into an ejaculative orgasm. And in order to ejaculate, your body basically enters into a momentary sympathetic state which is the flight, fight, or freeze state, and basically causes your muscles to contract. In our pelvis, we have basically what is called the PC muscle. I'm not going to try and say the actual term of it. It's very hard to say. But this muscle basically rapidly contracts and tightens, causing you to orgasm and basically expel your semen. It's helping to basically pump and get everything going. And the reason it's called PNR is because once you tip over that point, once your arousal reaches that level and tips over that point of no return, your body basically enters into an involuntary chain of events. The train has left the station, it cannot be stopped. During a typical sex session, you're basically working up your arousal levels to the point of no return, tipping over, and then entering into orgasm and ejaculating. All you need to do in order to last longer in the bedroom is identify where your point of no return is before you ejaculate and basically keep your arousal levels from reaching that point. Easily said, harder to do. In order for you to actually identify where your point of no return is, you can do this on your own by basically pleasuring yourself and following the sensations and your arousal levels until you reach that point. And you'll know when you've reached that point because your breath becomes faster, more shallow, and constricted. You'll feel your body start to tense, especially like the muscles in your thighs and your legs. Some people will curl their toes. Your entire sensation focus, your awareness becomes focused on your genital area. Your movements become more pattern or mechanical. Your genital area basically becomes like a sharp or heavy feeling. You can feel your arousal and your pleasure levels raising very quickly. You feel the desire to apply more stimulation. Your lower belly also starts to get tense because your core is often connected with your pelvic area. And so if that's becoming tight and tense, you can feel your lower belly and core area becoming tense as well. You also feel compelled to want to squeeze your pelvic area, squeeze your penis muscles. You may also feel a sharp feeling at the top of your penis, as if the semen was already coming out. And of course, you feel this sense of urgency to want to come. The moments that you're feeling these things, feeling that need to ejaculate, that's the moment right before the point of no return is coming. Once you cross that point, you are going to ejaculate. So now this might be leading you down the path of thinking, okay, well, I just need to keep my arousal levels down, right? If I keep them down, I'm not going to reach the point of no return and I'm not going to come. The problem with that is if you lower your arousal levels too much, then you're not going to be very turned on and there's a possibility of losing your erection. So the real task is maintaining your arousal levels high enough so that you stay turned on and have an erection, but low enough that you don't cross the PNR. So it can be very helpful to learn your own body's arousal level on a scale of 1 to 10. And you can do this by being aware of how aroused you are while you're doing self-pleasuring, where 1 would be little to no arousal, kind of like staring at the wall and watching paint dry. And level 9 on the arousal level basically being your point of no return, and 10 being ejaculation. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to try and keep your arousal levels between a 5 and 9 at all times. And while you're self-pleasuring, you can do this by basically edging yourself, a technique that we'll discuss later, bringing yourself to the edge of ejaculation, and then coming back down in your arousal. In theory, you could continue bouncing between these levels forever and never come. So now that you understand that concept, let's get into 7 techniques to help you last longer in bed. Technique number 1 is to reduce your sexual performance anxiety. This is basically a form of performance anxiety where you anticipate not being able to perform as you would like in bed, either by staying erect the entire time or lasting as long as you think you should. I already mentioned this before, but in order to ejaculate, your body's going to enter into momentarily the sympathetic state, the fight, flight, or freeze state. And when that happens, and in combination with being stimulated, your PC muscles are going to start contracting, tighten us up, and lead us to orgasm. When you get so caught up in your head about lasting a long time in bed, you start getting anxious about your performance, and then you start to lose awareness and control of your PC muscle. You begin tensing up, you begin contracting your body, and this is going to lead to more rapid ejaculation because that anxiety is causing the same state that you're going to have eventually when you ejaculate. So your body's just going to move quicker to that. The other scenario is if you're worried about keeping your erection the entire time. So you can actually start rushing the interaction and moving very rapidly towards orgasm because you're trying to make the most of your erection while it still lasts. This basically results in you hurrying through foreplay, getting to penetration as quickly as possible, and then ultimately coming quicker than you would have liked. And what sucks about this is performance anxiety can actually have a nasty feedback loop where if you come quickly one time, this can lead to sexual performance anxiety and then basically lead you to overthink every single ejaculation in the future. And this is really shitty to deal with. So I actually wrote an article of how to deal with sexual performance anxiety. I'm going to leave a link down below. If you're in that cycle, don't worry. It is simple to get out of. It takes a little work, but you're not going to be in this anxious cycle the entire time. Bottom line of it though, is you have to get out of your head and back into the sensations of your body. All right, technique number 2 is Kegels versus reverse Kegels. Recall earlier that I spoke about the PC muscle, which controls your ejaculation, as well as the flow of urine in your body. The PC muscle is basically located in this network of muscles inside of your pelvic area that make up the pelvic floor. And that consists of layers of muscles, ligaments, and fascia, which is basically the connective tissue of everything. And this basically stretches like a hammock from the front of your pelvic bone all the way to the tailbone. These structures basically make up the bowl or bottom of the pelvis in both men and women. And just like any other muscle, these muscles can be trained in order to strengthen them, gain better mind-muscle connection, and improve the voluntary control of those muscles. And there's 2 exercises that can be used to improve your PC muscle. That's Kegels, which is a voluntary tightening, squeezing, and contracting of the muscle. And then there's reverse Kegels, which is a voluntary relaxing, letting go of that contraction in the muscle. Now, as a guy, your first thought is like, well, I need to strengthen the muscles. That's what we do with the rest of our muscles. And so you may jump to doing a lot of Kegels, which if you look on the internet, that's usually the advice, is to strengthen your PC muscle by doing Kegels. But you may actually be making the problem worse by doing so. The Kegel muscle is not like a bicep where you need to hammer the hell out of it and bigger is better. Having an optimally functioning piece of muscle where you have voluntary control over it is about balance, where you have the right amount of tonality, but it's not overly tight. If you're a guy who does lower body workouts like squat and deadlift, or you have a job that you basically sit at a desk all day, it's more likely that your PC muscle is overly contracted and tight. And for you, doing reverse Kegels would actually be more beneficial. Of course, you need to gain awareness of how tight that muscle is for you to actually figure out which exercise may be better for you. So to identify the PC muscle, squeeze the same muscles that you would squeeze in order to stop the flow of urination. Another way to identify these muscles is think about the muscles you squeeze when you're trying to keep from farting or passing gas. And it may feel like your pelvic floor, that bottom area of your pelvis, is being pulled up, sort of like it's being pulled up inside you. So now that you've identified those muscles, let's talk about how to do Kegels, and talk about how to do reverse Kegels. So to perform Kegels, identify, gain awareness, and isolate those PC muscles. So don't flex your butt like you're trying to show off your glutes. Don't flex your legs. Don't flex your abs. Keep all of those relaxed. Focus on just contracting those pelvic floor muscles. Then you're going to want to contract, tighten, and hold those for a certain amount of time. So this is usually contracting for 3 to 5 seconds and then releasing. And if you're a beginner, just end for 5 repetitions. As you get stronger, you can increase to 10 contractions that are held for 10 seconds and then having 10 seconds of rest in between those contractions. And you can aim for doing 3 sets of these throughout the day. Luckily for you, it can be done pretty much anywhere. There's other variations of the Kegel exercise that you can do. That's the basic one. I'm going to leave a link to the article that goes over some of these techniques that has a few other variations as well. But now let's talk about reverse Kegels. They target the same muscle group, just in reverse. So rather than feeling the muscles kind of lift up and go into the body, you're actually going to feel them push out and relax. It's going to be a similar feeling to the relief you get when you actually start peeing or when you're having a bowel movement. And using deep breathing can actually help with this down training process. And that's because during a deep diaphragmatic breath, you're actually breathing into the bottom of your stomach, which is going to push on those muscles of the pelvic floor and help them to expand and relax. And then when you're exhaling that deep breath, it's actually going to bring the pelvic floor back up. So you get this natural contraction and relaxation. So in order to perform reverse Kegels, do as you did before, where you're identifying and isolating those pelvic floor muscles. Remember, we're not trying to flex our legs or our glutes or our abs or any other area. Those are all going to stay relaxed. We're just identifying the PC muscles. And what you want to do here is basically relax and breathe deeply into the bottom of your stomach, trying to release the tension in that pelvic area. You can basically imagine the air pushing the bottom of your stomach and kind of pushing down and outwards. And what you're doing in this process is trying to identify that feeling of tension versus relaxation. It should feel really, really good. And you're going to want to continue the cycle of deep breathing into the pelvic floor and relaxing, deep breathing into the pelvic floor and relaxing, doing 5 to 10 breaths. You can further help release some of the tension by massaging the pelvic floor area, also massaging your legs where they meet the pelvic floor, and releasing any muscle tension that's happening there. And both of these exercises can be performed throughout the day, multiple times a day. Now let's talk about technique number 3, which is going to be edging and stamina training. So you've identified your PC muscles, you have better mind-body connection with them, better control of them. It's now time to start stamina training. For most of your life, you've probably masturbated in the same way, using friction to get to ejaculation as quickly as possible. You start masturbating when you're aroused and you ride that all the way till the end. What this has done is basically trained your body to be very efficient at coming. It's like, I know this entire process. We're going to get quicker and quicker as we go. If we were to graph your arousal levels, it's basically going from 0 to 10 as quickly as it can. And you're hitting that point of no return without even being aware of it. In order to last longer in bed, you want to train yourself to be able to control your arousal level, bringing it up to the edge of point of no return and coming back down. So your arousal levels would instead look like this graph. And that can be achieved by practicing stamina training, or better known as edging, and doing this over extended periods of time. You'll first start by training yourself to last for 10 minutes. And as that becomes easier, you're going to extend your sessions to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so on and so forth. So to do stamina training, basically start masturbating and get yourself to a level 7 out of 10 arousal. And this is pretty subjective. It's not like there's a definitive thing at each number. You're going to know as you practice more what a 7 on your arousal level feels like. You're just looking more for that general feeling. And when you reach that level, you're going to stop, breathe, try and breathe into that pelvic floor, releasing those muscles and bringing yourself back down to about a 5. Now you're going to continue masturbating and work yourself up to an 8. So a little more aroused than last time. Then stop again, bring yourself back down to a 5. Then you're going to work yourself back up, then bring yourself back down to a 6, be a little more aroused. Up to an 8, down to a 7. Up to an 8.5, down to a 7 again. Up to an 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.9, before you're reaching that point of no return, and bringing yourself back down to a 6 or 7. And you're basically going to keep repeating this cycle for 10 minutes. After the 10-minute mark, you can either ejaculate at this point, or you can stop entirely and not ejaculate, training yourself that you don't always need to ejaculate. During the periods when you are trying to lower that arousal level, so coming back from that edge, try and change your stroke and slow it down significantly instead of stopping completely. This is a lot more beneficial because during sex, you don't want to be stopping and going all the time. As you're starting to learn this, that's okay. But over time, you want to be able to still continue movement and pleasure for her without having to stop entirely. But as you're beginning, if you're too aroused, totally okay to stop. You're learning your body at this moment. If you're reaching closer to that point of no return, you can squeeze your PC muscle, sort of like you're doing an intense Kegel. Hold it for 10 seconds and basically let yourself start to come down. After that release, you're going to want to take a deep diaphragmatic breath, breathing into that PC muscle and relaxing everything. I recommend setting aside time every night or some point during the day where you can practice this, because the more that you do, the better that you're going to be at it, because you're retraining your body now. That's, I'm not going to ejaculate quickly. You're going to gain more confidence because you've done it many times in the bedroom, so that when you actually do have sex with somebody, it's just kind of like doing another training session. It's going to be very tempting to want to let yourself go when you're reaching those 8.5 to 8.9 peaks. But trust me, exercising like this and not coming when you're reaching those peaks, it's going to pay dividends later. All right, technique number 4 is strategic foreplay ordering. So the previous techniques that we talked about are mostly things that you're going to do on your own, preparing for sex later. Now it's time to talk about techniques that you can use when you're in sex and ways to keep yourself from coming early. And one of the great ways to do this is by the order that you do foreplay. For the average couple, foreplay follows a similar pattern. Basically start with kissing and touching, then you might move to cunnilingus, then she might give you fellatio, and then you're going to move to intercourse. The problem with this order, though, is that you're going from intense oral stimulation from getting a blowjob, raising your arousal levels, and then going straight into intercourse. What's far better is going into intercourse at a 4 or 5 on the arousal level scale, not at an 8 where you're almost all ready to pop. What's more effective when you're ordering your foreplay is alternating and switching between who's getting the focus of pleasure at that moment. What this does is basically allows you time to cool off and let your arousal levels lower while also raising hers. And you also get the added benefit if you focus time on her, giving her orgasms, she may have many more orgasms before you ever get to yours. So in our basic example, you would start with kissing and touching, and then maybe you move to fingering and getting her off once manually. Then you might get fellatio, where you're being aroused a little bit, and then moving to cunnilingus so that you have time to lower your arousal levels before getting to intercourse. Of course, this channel talks a lot more about BDSM and different kinky activities. So you actually have a whole wide range of activities that you can be doing before you ever get to intercourse. Furthermore, intercourse does not have to be a mad dash to get to ejaculation. And you can actually interweave other activities, allowing you different cool down phases. So, for example, you could start with kissing and touching, moving to impact play and spanking, then having fellatio, moving to fingering, then moving to getting a hand job, moving to cunnilingus, moving to intercourse, moving to using a vibrator, so pulling out and using a vibrator while you cool down, moving to getting more fellatio, and moving to intercourse. And just keep moving through different things. You keep weaving. What you don't want to do is basically start something, then stop because you need to cool down. Basically, during any of the activities that you're being stimulated, once you reach somewhere between a 7 and 9, you basically want to stop and switch it up to something else so that you have that cool down period. And during that cool down period, you just focus on her, getting her off, and she may have an orgasm or two during that time. That when you do get back to being stimulated, you're pretty much in the clear. All right, technique number 5 is changing positions so that you can better edge yourself during sex. Edging yourself during foreplay is a little easier. Edging yourself when you're having intercourse becomes a little more difficult. And this is because you don't want to keep starting and stopping your thrusting, because that's going to be frustrating for her and it's going to give you performance anxiety because you're worried about coming. Instead, you can edge yourself during intercourse by switching up positions, because there are some positions that are going to create more friction and more stimulation for you, which is going to move you up the arousal levels, and other positions that have decreased stimulation and sometimes even more increased stimulation for her, which is a win-win. So in general, any position that has her legs closed is going to create more stimulation and tightening around you. Plus, any position where you're doing a lot of the thrusting and work, especially lying down, such as in missionary, is going to be very highly stimulating and get you off faster. But positions that have her legs spread and have you standing or kneeling is usually going to produce less stimulation. Same story if she's on top of you, grinding back and forth rather than going up and down. So to decrease your arousal, use low stimulation positions that are low friction and less stimulation for your dick. They use very shallow thrusting, so not going as deep as you can, or use grinding back and forth rather than an up and down. You also want to be in positions where you control the tempo. That way you can slow things down if you're getting too aroused. And important here is in whatever position that you're in, you're not using your PC muscles in order to create that thrusting. Most easily done in positions where you're standing or you're lying on your back. And if you're starting to get bored and less aroused, then to increase your arousal, you're going to use high stimulation positions. These are ones that cause a lot of friction and stimulation for you. They involve deep penetration, where you're penetrating your entire shaft. They're going to have quick tempo and rapid movements, and you're going to be contracting your PC muscles a lot during those thrusts. So as you're having intercourse and you're getting more aroused, reaching those peaks almost to the point of no return, you can switch from a high stimulation position to a low stimulation position. Likewise, if you're falling too low in your stimulation, you can switch to a higher stimulating position. The beauty though is that in between the switching, you get a little bit of a cool down period as you move to the next position. And if you decide I am just too far in and you have to stop stimulation altogether, then switch to focusing on her and still stimulating her in some way, either fingering her, eating her out, using a vibrator or some toy. That way she is still getting pleasure as you're cooling down. Now, as you're doing this, pay attention to your pelvic floor muscles, giving deep breaths, relaxing that diaphragm so that you're ready to resume intercourse. All right. Technique number 6 is going to be breathing in order to move sensations. So we've already talked a lot about doing deep diaphragmatic breaths in order to relax those PC muscles, but your arousal levels and your breath are pretty closely linked to one another. The next time that you're having sex, just pay attention to how you breathe when you're getting close to orgasm. It's going to be very similar to something known as Tumo breath or breath of fire, which is short, rapid, and shallow. If you're breathing like that during intercourse, it's going to push you quicker to ejaculation. So in order to decrease your arousal, you basically want to do the opposite of that, which is long, slow, deep breaths. So as you're having intercourse, pay attention to your breath. Consciously make a choice to be breathing deeply into your diaphragm. This basically has the added benefit that it's going to keep your PC muscles relaxed, sort of like you're doing a reverse Kegel. But the other added benefit is because you're focused intently on your breath and what's happening in your body, you're actually going to have more awareness of the sensations happening in your body, and you're not going to be stuck in your head, which we already know from before leads to sexual performance anxiety. Now, you may notice as you gain more awareness about the sensations happening in your body, that as you're getting closer to ejaculating, it feels like all this pressure is at the tip of your dick. There's a tantric practice known as the microcosmic orbit, which basically helps you to take that concentrated feeling in your pelvic area and disseminate it to the rest of your body, which basically keeps you from feeling like your dick is on the edge of exploding. So to perform a microcosmic orbit, you're going to begin by breathing deeply into your diaphragm and into your pelvic floor. And as you're breathing deeply in, you're going to visualize these pleasurable sensations basically circulating under your pelvis and up the back side of your body to the crown of your head. And as you're doing this, just pay attention to how the rest of the body feels there. So as you're circulating, how does your pelvis feel? How does your glutes feel? How does your back feel? Your arms as it's coming up, and as you're reaching the top of the head, what do those sensations feel like? And then as you're exhaling the breath, you got to visualize those sensations moving down the front of your body and back to your pelvis. And that basically creates the orbit. And you're going to continue to do this cycle and use that visualization and awareness on the sensations to basically disseminate all of those pleasurable feelings to the rest of your body. And this is actually going to help you create a better mind-body connection to the sensations that are happening in the rest of your body. A lot of times when we're having intercourse, we're so focused on the genitals that we don't actually realize that the rest of our body is actually feeling very pleasurable in the moment as well. Our skin is basically the largest pleasure sensor of the entire body, and it's being touched and caressed and held and moved on, which is also going to feel very pleasurable. Doing this can actually help you to experience full body orgasms rather than just an ejaculation from your dick, which can be very pleasurable. And then our last technique, technique number 7, is doing multiple rounds. If you recall from earlier in the video, I said, even though I know all of these techniques, there are still times that I come quicker than I would have liked. There'll be times that I'm just so aroused by her that I come quickly, or I've been very stressed out from the day. I'm already kind of anxious. And so that just kind of rolls over into the bedroom. So the last fail-safe for me has always been to go multiple rounds. As in, you ejaculate once, you take a rest, and then you go for a much longer round afterwards. Because you've already ejaculated, your body most of the time has less of an urge to want to do it again. During this time, you also usually have decreased sensation, and it takes much more to get you to those higher arousal levels. So if you put into practice all the techniques that we've already talked about on your second round, it's much more likely that that's going to outpace your first round by a mile. In fact, there's times that sometimes I'll ejaculate on the first round, and then the second round, I just have sex until I'm satisfied, not even ejaculating the second time. And sometimes that even gets me more aroused, and then we're, cuddling afterwards, and it'll lead to a third round and so on. I think this technique, even though I saved it for last, is probably one of the most important because it takes a lot of the stress and weight off, which is going to cause sexual performance anxiety. And that's a huge barrier to keeping everything under control. But if you take that stress off, like, oh, I already came quickly once, but I'm going to do a second round and it doesn't matter. It brings a lot of ease to that first round. Instead, you're just looking at it like, hey, I'm going to try my best during the first round, but if I come quickly, doesn't matter. There's going to be another one. But by now, you should be realizing that lasting a long time in the bedroom is only one skill that you can learn. And honestly, isn't even one of the most important skills for sexual competency. So as you begin mastering your own body, mastering control of your ejaculation, think about including more skills into your repertoire, even while you're learning how to do that. Start developing some other areas. This might be developing your dominance, developing different technical skills, spanking, hair pulling, other things that I've gone over in this channel, or learning how to use your voice during sex and getting into dominant dirty talk. Any of these are going to make the experience more enjoyable for you and your partner, and it's going to set you apart from many other guys. So I'm going to leave resources down to those below, including videos and articles on how to do different techniques. But if you're trying to figure out what's a roadmap for how do I learn all these things, what do I have available to me, I created a video here about developing your sexual dominance, kind of roadmaps going from low dominance to high dominance, the different things that you can learn. So check that video out, and thank you so much for your time and attention.